Hey everyone, we're going to go ahead and talk about the SmallHD Focus monitor and how we utilize it to film weddings. We're going to go over how we also calibrated the monitor, and then also the new firmware that just came out. I believe it's 3.11 that we're going to be talking about, and then also the different windows that we use and the different features that we really like to use whenever we're filming weddings. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the calibration of the screen. Now, whenever we first started filming and we got the Focus monitor, we really loved it, but we noticed it had somewhat of a little bit of a warmth tone to it. So to calibrate the monitor, we actually just connected it to our laptop. So I just pulled up the laptop and I would plug it up HDMI and just plug it straight into there. And then we can actually view a calibrated visual and then also the SmallHD Focus monitor, and then we would look at it and we would be able to visually tell if we noticed if the colors were shifted a little bit differently or not. So once I connected the Focus monitor to the laptop, I noticed that it felt a little bit warm, and so I went ahead and tried to calibrate it. Now on the actual menu system, if you swipe all the way over to the left, you will see all these different options here. So we ended up playing around with the input field and then also the calibration field and the appearance field. So on the input field, you actually have gamma, lift, and gain information. So now on the GH5, because we're actually using the GH5 with the Focus monitor, we actually got the Panasonic kit, and it comes with the actual battery for it and then also the proper cable, so it connects HDMI. Now whenever we connected it, we have our luminance level set on our GH5 to 0 to 255. Now, after talking with SmallHD, they said that this is a broadcast safe monitor, which means that it is maxing out at 235. So whenever I was filming, I was looking at some stuff and I noticed that the highlights, I could see it on the actual swivel screen on the GH5, but on the SmallHD Focus, it looked a little blown out. Now, I went ahead and turned and clicked on the lift and gamma section, and I actually changed the gain information to -20. Now, by switching it to -20, that actually allowed us to visually see the highlight information that was not displayed on the broadcast safe monitor. So now that we shifted that, that's what we did for the input field. Now we're going to go ahead and go to the calibration menu system. Now the calibration menu system, there's some extra options now with the new firmware update, which means you can actually calibrate the monitor with a probe. Now SmallHD sent me this probe. It's an X-Rite probe, and this actually works with the software. It's plug and play. You just set it on top, plug it in, and it literally will run the calibration and calibrate your monitor. And that will allow you to get a perfectly calibrated Focus monitor, which is really cool. Now, if you don't have the probe, then the other option you have is to visually adjust some of the values. Now, if you go to the Appearance tab, you get all these extra functions. You get RGB that you can actually change that information as well. Now, that's what I mainly used. So I actually connected it to a laptop and was pulling up and looking at both images side by side. And I am going to share with you the different values that I chose. Now you can try it and see if it looks good for you, but you can also connect it to your computer to a calibrated screen and test it on your own as well. Now I actually set on the RGB gain, I actually selected RGB gain. Now on RGB gain, I had different values that I adjusted that got me close to a calibrated monitor, so in a calibrated look. Now what I did is I actually had the red that I shifted to 80, to green I had set to 88, and then blue I set to 110. Okay, now whenever I set those, the colors started getting a lot closer to what I was seeing on the Focus monitor and what I saw on a calibrated screen. So I also adjusted my sharpness to 2 because this is a 720p monitor. Now we were filming on the 501, which is a 1080p, so everything's a little bit crisper. Now I ended up sharpening it a little bit more just so that things are a little bit more crisp. But ultimately, the features on this Focus are phenomenal. The touchscreen alone blows this thing out of the water, in my opinion. So it makes it super efficient, especially when you're running gun and shooting for weddings. With those settings, I got a pretty calibrated monitor look that matched what we were working on in post. So that's what we have for calibrating our monitor, especially the Focus monitor. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to dive into the different windows that we use whenever we're filming weddings. Now when we're filming weddings, we want to be run and gun. We want to be able to look at our screen really effectively. Now the GH5 swivel screen is still pretty decent and really good. It's definitely a step up from Sony's. Now, but the functions that you get with the focus monitor is phenomenal. So on our first one, I'm going to show you a little bit. We have 4 different tabs that I use on the first window. I use the aspect ratio, I use focus peaking, I use LUT utility, and then also I use the grid with a 3 grid setup so that I can actually see and compose my image properly. Now, with the first one, I actually have the aspect ratio set, and that is on a custom ratio because you can actually set it to 2391, which is anamorphic, but I want it to 235. So I actually set the width to 100 and the height to 75, and that actually gets it fairly close to a 235 aspect ratio. I have my color set to black for the bars, and then I have my opacity to 85. Personal preference, you can change those colors to whatever you like. On the focus peaking, this is my favorite function. I actually have focus peaking on here. Now, we actually have a really good focus peaking on the GH5, but the focus peaking on the monitor, instead of the focus assist, we have the focus peaking. Focus peaking, it over sharpens the image that is in focus. So instead of actually giving you a color, it just gives you an overly sharpened section. So it actually helps me find focus, but also not distracted by the colors if I don't want color options. So I actually keep the focus peaking on, and I have my intensity set to 20. Now with the new firmware update, you can actually go all the way up to 31. I believe it was 15 before. But now I set mine to 20, and I'm really liking the look of that. Also, my looks and LUTs, I actually use a lot of LUTs from Lutify. If you want to check a video out I did on color grading with Lutify LUTs, go ahead and you can go ahead and click up right here, and I'm going to have information on that where you can actually look at that video and how I filmed some weddings and how we color graded them using Lutify LUTs. I actually will load them in here. One of my favorite LUTs that I use is from the teal and orange package in Lutify. And the reason why I use a teal and orange look is not necessarily because that's what I'm going to use in post, but if my white balance is slightly off, it will intensify that effect and let me know that, okay, this is super warm or this is super cold. So that actually helps me nail white balance even better. If I'm visually looking at the GH5 screen and I'm like, I can't quite tell, it looks decent, but if I want to dial it in, I can actually go ahead and turn on that look, and it gets me really close on the spot to make sure that my white balance isn't set. And lastly, I have the Crosshatch, which is a grid, and I have it set up to 3 different regions, and I actually have the color set to yellow. I like the color yellow. Whenever I'm looking at a grid, it pops from everything else. So that is what I have for the first window, and this is what I mainly use for weddings. Now, one of the cool functions here is my second window, and I just swipe over, and instantly I get the exposure assist. Now, the exposure assist is really awesome, and this allows me to make sure that my skin tone is properly adjusted with exposure whenever I'm filming a wedding. Sometimes I'm not wanting to blow things out, but if I'm framing something and I notice, okay, I'm trying to protect the highlights, but the bride is sitting there and maybe the image looks a little, maybe the skin doesn't pop as well. Well, I can just swipe over it really quick and see, okay, is the skin tone properly exposed? Because if you're using the exposure assist, you can look at the style and you can have spectrum is what I have listed. Now spectrum, the greens will be a great exposure level for skin tone, right around 70 IRE. It's closer to like 60 IRE. So I have my skin tone right around the green and subtly into the blue. That's where I know that my skin is properly exposed when I'm shooting on this monitor and shooting with the GH5. So that is something to consider, and that is a really cool function, and it lets me know that, okay, if I'm trying to shoot and protect the highlights, but my skin tone is way in the blue and too dark, but I want to be able to see good skin tone, that tells me, okay, I just need to reframe my shot and get to a different section so I can have proper skin tone. Or just know that I'm going to not have a good exposure level for my skin tone. So instantly, whenever I'm framing a shot, I'm just looking at it, and I have my look, and then all of a sudden I just swipe right, check to make sure that my exposure is good for skin tone, and then swipe back. Just a quick way to check, and it's super helpful. Now, with the new update, you have a really cool function with the firmware update and the exposure assist. So you can actually dial in and map the different regions that IRE and set the different color levels that you want, which is a really awesome function. So I can dial in and make only my skin tone range, wherever I want that to be, say 55 to 70. I can set that to be green, and then I can have my highlights from like 90 or 95 on up to be red, and then I can have the blacks from like 0 to say 10. I can have that to be magenta or pink. Therefore, I can tell immediately if something's blown out, something's too dark, or where my skin tone range is. So you can dial that in and you can map those regions with the new firmware update, which is a really cool function. So that's one of my favorite functions, that one and the calibration option in the new firmware update for the SmallHD Focus. Now, that is my second window, and my third window is something that I've been trying lately, and I really like it. And all that is mainly it's a black and white LUT that I load. Now, the reason why I would use a black and white LUT is in particular reasons. Now, obviously, we don't have raw information whenever we're filming on the GH5, so I need to make sure my white balance is set instead of waiting in post like I'm shooting on a camera, and I can use raw and just change my white balance. Shooting in black and white, it gives me a different outlook on what I'm filming and helps me see things differently. So if I walk into a room, I set my my white balance, then I know I'm not gonna have to shift it as long as I'm in that range and I know there's no color kind of with the light changing. Then I will just swipe over to black and white and start shooting in black and white. Now, what that allows me to do is I will be able to see shadows. I'll look at highlight information differently, and it helps me focus on texture and also helps me see emotion well. We were filming a reception a couple weeks back, and I ended up getting my white balance set and then just switching to black and white for all the dancing. And what that let me do is I actually saw things in a different perspective, which is really cool. So I was panning down and I saw the bride swinging her dress, and I noticed this is a really cool texture moment. I was looking at the way the light was hitting the ground. Instead of being distracted by all the different colors that are happening, it helped me see things and look at the way the light's hitting the window. And also, since it's black and white, I'm not distracted by color, and I would focus on emotions. I started seeing people's faces and their emotions come through more when I was filming in black and white. And so that helped me see things differently. That would be a cool tip. Maybe try it, see if you like it. Just be prepared to make sure that your white balance is set before you switch to black and white. And then I just swipe back to my first window if I want to make sure that everything's set. So those are the functions that we use whenever we're filming weddings. I went ahead and showed you the 3 different windows and the different features that we like to use. Go ahead and try those out if you have the Focus monitor. If you don't, rent it or buy it. I highly recommend it. It's one of the best monitors on the market, especially for the price and the quality, especially when you're filming weddings. I had the 501 and I still use this, but man, I keep on coming to the SmallHD Focus monitor because of the swipe features and all the extra functions, and the clarity is great, and the brightness level is almost double this, I believe, and so I can see out in daylight. It's really great. So those are the functions. We also went over the calibration and how you can visually set up to calibrate the monitor so that you can get a good image what you're looking at to know what it's going to look like in post. So hopefully that's helpful. If you like this video, go ahead and push the like button. We're going to be working on putting some more videos together. If you have any comments, seriously, leave them in the comment section below. I'll try to answer them and help you guys out. If there's any other videos you want us to do, let me know and we'll get working on those as well. So as always, thanks so much, and please subscribe, and we'll see you later.